All right. Tonight, um, several of you have already said to me this was a really good week for you with the John study. Anybody affirm that?
It is.
It was for me. I go back through it. I started this process, it's been 3 years ago now, working on this. And after I did my writing, then it went through Allison's notes and writing for a year. And then putting this together, Hannah is our editor. She edits with me what you see in final form. And so a lot of times you get into that and you kind of lose uh, everything that had happened during that time. But I went back through it personally this week too, and I told somebody already tonight, it was really good, even if I did have something to do with it. I thought it was a good week. I mean, it was good to me to go back through it this way. So I hope it has been to you. What I try to do um, is do some teaching that's along some theme in this week, but some extra material that you don't have. And so that's what I'm going to do tonight. But then we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions about anything you read, and I'll see how I can respond to that. Allison should be here next week. She'll be teaching for a couple of Wednesdays, and then I'll finish out teaching the rest of the book. One of the features of this week that stood out to me and has for years is John 13, 34, and 35. So if you have your Bibles, you might want to turn to that. Or you can look on page 20 where I'm going to be looking. Yeah, it starts, I think, earlier than that, but I'm going to be looking at some things on page 20 with you. Back in 1980, I memorized this verse. A new commandment I give to you, Jesus said, that you love one another. By this shall all men know you're my disciples indeed, if, conditional statement there, if you have love one to another. So the way in which we love those around us shows people either a true or a false picture of Christ. Did y'all catch that? He said, a new commandment I give, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now that's our goal, is to love like he loved us. Now, if we do that, people do get an accurate picture of Christ. If we don't, they don't get an accurate picture of Christ. But as I go through that verse, I think about what's so new about this? I mean, we have it in the Old Testament that we're to love one another. So what makes it new? Well, Christ himself makes this new. And on page 20, we said here Christ had at least three kinds of love that would be considered new to his disciples and all believers. Okay, let's think about this for a moment. Jesus presented a sermon we know as the Sermon on the Mount. Starts in Matthew chapter 5. And remember him saying something like this? You've heard it said of old, thou shalt not kill. Remember that? And then he said, but I tell you, this is new. It's the same kind of thought process, but yet new. You've heard it said, thou shalt not kill, but I tell you, if you have hatred in your heart toward your brother, you've committed murder. Now, did you know that what that means is everybody in this room is a murderer? Because I don't know of anybody in this room that's never had hatred towards someone else. Do y'all know of anybody? Anybody want to admit that you're perfect? Okay. So Jesus brought a newness to it that was much deeper than law. Law was right. Don't kill. That's correct. That's a good plan to live by. But it makes it newer, deeper, and more alive when he said, you got to have this internally in your heart. If you have a relationship with Christ internally in your heart, why are you considering murder or adultery or whatever else it may be? So he gives a new commandment that goes far deeper than just following a rule. He wanted us to follow who he is. He wanted us to follow not a rule, but a relationship. And this is the new love that he's talking about here in John. Now, in light of what you read, we tried to run this theme through this week. The kindness of God. How kind is it of God to give us a new commandment to love one another? Well, it's very kind because in and of ourselves, won't make you consider your heart and your mind right now. In and of yourselves, I bet there's somebody that could come to your mind right now that you would say, this person is not easy to love. Quit looking at them. All right. We can all think of someone like that. But you see, he's saying if you've got it right between Jesus and you, you'll have it right between you and others. This is the new commandment. You get the relationship with Christ right, and you can have it right with others. Now, it doesn't mean they'll have it right with you, but you'll be in control of your heart and your mind toward them. So, we talked about that. What makes it new? Number one, we see there on page 20 is love in action. My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Now, this is that new commandment. Don't say, I love them in the Lord, because you think that qualifies you, because that sounds good. I know you Southerners. Y'all said this before. Well, I love them in the Lord. No, you don't. You're already trying to excuse your internal feelings. You know, it's kind of like, bless their heart. You know, we say things to look right, whether we're right or not. So to love in action, look what Jesus said. To love in word or in tongue, but that's not going to do it. Just to say it. It's kind of like this. Well, I forgave them a long time ago. Well, just because you say it doesn't mean you did. You may have, but the words themselves don't qualify the heart. The deeds do. It's kind of like this: what you do next reveals what you believe about God. So if you act right, you're being right, your deeds are right, your works are right, the truth is right, then the tongue can match up with what's going on internally. Now, in Jeremiah, right now we're working through the book of Jeremiah, and I'm in Jeremiah chapter 47. And Jeremiah 47 through the end of the book is a picture of God's actions against his enemies, the ones who refused to follow truth. And let me see if I can turn to that real quick. I don't know if you want to or not, but Jeremiah 47. And verse 6. Now, God, it's warm in here, isn't it? It doesn't need to be on heat. We got enough hot air in here already. Turn that thing to cool. And turn that little fan on back there. Stir some air around. Teresa, open that door for just crack it up. There you go. That'll help some.
Somebody just turned it in.
I know, but it's heat, I think.
Oh, well, we'll begin.
It's definitely not pumping any cool air in here. Now we're back to the Bible, okay? Jeremiah 47, look at verse 6. O you sword of the Lord, how long until you're quiet? In other words, God was beginning to come to the nations who refused to obey him. And he's beginning to slay them. Put yourself up into your scabbard, rest and be still. How can it be quiet, seeing the Lord has given it a charge against Ashkelon and against the seashore? There he has appointed it. Well, what he's talking about is the fact that these are people who have refused to do what God said. Now, even the children of Judah and Israel, mainly Judah, were the same way. They were not doing what God had required. And as a result, destruction was coming. Well, you know what Judah was going to do now that Babylon was in control? They're going to run to Egypt for protection. Jeremiah said, don't go there. The Lord's going to follow you. In the New Testament, we have this idea. I bet y'all can fill in the blank. The Lord chastens those he loves. Okay, now this is a Skinner paraphrase. The Lord chases those he loves and he catches them. If you try to escape the obedience to God, he will pursue you as a child of God. If he doesn't pursue you, you better be questioning whether or not you are. But what we see is God's love brings a sword against sin. Now, a lot of times we think, well, it's not love to tell somebody they're doing the wrong thing. Well, it's not kindness to know they're doing the wrong thing and not tell them either. Does love discipline?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does the person being disciplined feel wonderful love? No. But love still disciplines. God's love disciplines sin. So, if there's sin, love must hate sin. It doesn't hate the people. It hates what sin is doing to the people. And so God pursues people who are in disobedience to Him. Well, I began thinking about this. And us New Testament Christians would say this, well, God doesn't judge Christians. Well, it's true eternally. There's not eternal judgment on a person who's truly been born again. But He does discipline. He does pursue in that way. But think about this. Those latter chapters of Jeremiah, God's dealing with all these different countries, these nations who had opposed truth and obedience. And people say, well, we're a Christian nation. No, we're a nation with some Christians in it. And God can judge America without condemning believers. Now, you're not going to come under utter eternal judgment as a believer. But if you're living in a nation that God's chosen to take action against, you will feel the result. You're still going to be there. I know this is so exciting and wonderful news to y'all tonight, but you need to hear this anyway. There's a building up of sin in nations through the generations. You know how you read the Old Testament and you see, here's one leader who followed God with all his heart, and then the next generation disobeyed God. And we say, why would they do that? Same reason we do. And so what happens in a nation, through the generations, there's a building up of sin problems. Sometimes we think America today, this is the worst it's ever been. Listen, what's worst about today is you know more about it. Some of you, when you were growing up, you didn't hear about what was happening till 2 weeks later. There wasn't a news channel everywhere. And some of you, when you were growing up, didn't have a TV. Is that true? Okay. So it wasn't instant. But what happens is, through the years, different generations, there's this building up of sin in their life and in others. There comes a point when God says, okay, that's enough. And it requires the sword. Okay, now, but I want you to see it from this perspective. The sword of the Lord is the love of God. When there's a building up of sin to the point it can't be tolerated anymore by God, the love of God takes effect and it begins to deal with the sin problem. Now, for us, aren't you grateful that Christ bears our consequences? That's why He went to the cross. He paid the price. That's good news. Now, notice, there's also a self-denying love. For even Christ did not please Himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproach you fell on Him. He took on the consequence of our sin. And there's a self-sacrificial love. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. This went way beyond you should love one another from the Old Testament perspective. It went into the real intents of the heart, the mind, the soul. God was so kind to us to give us a new commandment because it required a higher calling, which requires a deeper relationship with God. If you're going to have a higher calling, you have to have a deeper relationship with God, more than just surface stuff. Well, some of you remember an old song, The Love of God. But I want to read this to you, and I want you to think about it for just a few minutes. It was a favorite of my dad's. My dad sang this often. But listen to this verse. The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen can ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star, and it reaches to the lowest hell. The guilty pair bowed down with care. God gave his son to win. His erring child he reconciled and pardoned from his sin. That's the love of God. O love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure, the saints' and angels' song. Now listen to this. Could we, with ink, the ocean fill? Imagine that. All the oceans of the earth are filled with ink. And were the skies of parchment made, were every stalk on earth a quill? Some of you know what a quill is. A pen. And every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry. Nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. That's the love of God. It's immeasurable. No matter how difficult it is when he deals with your personal sin, that's the sword, the love of God being applied to your life. Why? Because he's not wanting you to move further away from him. He's wanting you to come back to him. So for me this week, focused on the love of God.